Hello everybody, tonight we are working on Chapter 8 and the topic for tonight is user controls. And this is kind of an interesting topic when we're working in .NET, and it's one of the things that makes it kind of unique, really. We've learned about server controls already, and this is really not that dissimilar, but they are slightly different, and really what you should see as the difference here is the fact that it says user controls. So what does that imply? Partially, but that we are creating the controls. Okay, so that's really kind of the crux of it. So something that we are creating as kind of like a module. It's kind of the way I like to think about it. And as a result of that, something that we can pick up and move from project to project. So that's kind of the nice feature of it. All right, and I'm going to just scroll down in the book here a little bit. And I know you guys can read this, so it's not. My attempt here is not to belittle your ability to read, but I just want to point out some highlights. There's one little section here where they talk about the similarities that user controls have with ASPX pages. Now, here's kind of the key part of this. The implication is that we're creating really what is kind of like another page or part of a page that has a different type of file extension. So it's going to be ASCX as opposed to PX. So one's for pages and one's for controls, basically. But there are similarities. So in other words, like once you have created that, really a lot of the things that you do is similar to working with pages. So and that's kind of the point of this. So you do use regular HTML, CSS, all that stuff. Any stuff that you can put on a regular page, you can put here. You can do the work with Visual Studio, and you can work in Design View or Markup View. You can have programming pages attached to them, and then you can do a couple of other things. So, for example, like pulling in data. So a real common thing, actually, when you get to higher level programming, is if you come up with a way to interface with a database, like especially a custom database, in an enterprise situation, you might create a user control that handles all those transactions for you. It might just be the connection string, or it could be the connection string in a form, or it could be a form. But you know that interface, I mean, if you're tying into a database and you've created something that works, why recreate it, right? I mean, you're tying to the same database, you use it over and over again. And then also, because of the ability to have it programmed, you can have it react to all the typical programming commands, including things like, page loads and things like that. So that's good basic information. Now notice when we're going to be doing this in just a little bit, but we're going to go into the interface where we are going to create this, and notice that there's actually a menu item for it. And really what it does is it creates a special type of class file that we leverage to be able to do the work. Notice here he's got an example of what the page header looks like, and you guys should be getting used to seeing these now. Like, on some of these you see like master, sometimes you see page, and you see here the directive is control. Otherwise, this looks very much like a regular ASP statement at the top of a page. So you got the standard delimiters and everything. It lists the language, tells you what the code file is, etc. All right, so let's dig in and get to work. Preemptively, of course, I did a backup of my Chapter 7 stuff, so I have that set aside, complete and working, and I continued my work in my regular site folder. I opened up my site inside of Visual Studio by going to Open Site. That was the approach that I used, and just so a refresher, I went right here to do that. So that is really an important part of this, folks, so that you guys are comfortable with managing your files and stuff. And I know it takes a little bit of time to get used to it. I'm also finding it a little strange now how Visual Studio is handling some of the solution files, and I don't know if you guys are running into that. Like my solution files for this are getting stored on a local folder, which I'm not comfortable with, because that way I can't pick up the whole project and move it. So I got my solution file in one place and my other files in a different place. not a comfortable feeling for me. So one thing that if I was to start the project over again, I'm not about to do it right now, is I would choose to make sure that that solution file's in the same folder with the project, so I can pick it up and move it. Now you have to think about the perspective of why they do that, right? Most people who are going to be developing are going to be working on a machine where those solution files, they really do not need to travel to the web server to make the project run, right? The only reason that we have that situation here is because we are running an internal web server. But if you push it out to a real Windows server, it operates a different way. It actually has to move onto the server. It has to get compiled on the server, treated as an application, and then published. So it's a little bit different than doing like a regular FTP on a static website. I'm hoping that before the class ends, especially for those of you here in the classroom, that we can take some of these sites and actually, and thinking about your final projects, and push them out to one of our SharePoint servers and make them publicly accessible. So let's cross our fingers and hope we can get to that point. I think that we're on a pretty good path right now. John, you got a question?
Yes.
I should still be able to open it, right? If it doesn't have the solution file, you just open it as a website, and then it will ask you to create one. That's a really good question. If I have difficulties, believe me, I will let you know. You know, and you'll see it in your grade book and go, oh my God, I'm getting a 0 or something like that. And that's more the impetus to get you to contact me to resolve the issue than anything else. All right, so let's go ahead. I'm going to move this off to the second screen so you guys can just watch me work here. I'm going to get my video recorder out of the way as well. All right, so we are on page 288. Step 1 is to open up the Planet Rock's website. We've already done that. And it says if you haven't done so already, create a controls folder. We've already done that too. But there is kind of a logic there. There are patterns, folks, right? Some projects that you're going to choose to build in Visual Studio will have a certain template, and you select it, you hit the button, and it pre-creates all the folders for you. So one of the conventions that they use for ASPX websites is the fact that you usually have a controls folder for controls, and then you put controls into them. That makes sense, right? Kind of like you put images in the images folder. All right, so maybe one of those days they'll actually make all of it one consistent thing, but I don't ever see that happening. But there's certain patterns that you follow in like Microsoft products. They also want us to, hey, finally create an images folder in the root of the site. You guys have been waiting for that since like week 2, right? So I'm going to go ahead and do that. They are using a capital I. And whatever your naming convention, I always try to be consistent. The ASP approach, of course, is to prefer that. Now, the other thing that they want us to do is to find the resources folder from the downloads that of the source code that came with the book, so that we can get the images that we need to work with to complete our exercises in this chapter. And basically what we're going to be doing is we're going to be building a banner ad component that will create as a control, and we'll have some programmatic code behind it that will allow it to either appear vertically or horizontally depending on what kind of situation it's placed into. And it'll do that dynamically, which is kind of a fun little thing. All right, so let's see if we can find those resources. I have downloaded those folders, and the way that they're pointing it out, it sounds like it should be in my folder here, but I can tell you that it's not, because I know it's not. Should I look at my old folder? Do I have a resource? No, I don't have it there either. So what I have to do is go to my original download, and that was unzipped, and they do have a separate folder in the root of that called resources. If I remember right, I might have even been kind enough to have included that on the resources page of our course shell, maybe not so kind, but the zip file is right here. So if you download this zip file and unzip it, then you will end up with basically this folder on your machine with a C# folder inside of it, and then the two subfolders that go with it. Now we are on Chapter 8, so we do need to pull some stuff out of here. And basically, you can see it's just two banner images, one that sits vertically, one that sits horizontally. So our objective at this point is to take these two images and get them into Visual Studio. So I'm just going to drag and drop them myself. If you want to do it a different way, that's fine. That's really up to you. There's a lot of different ways to do it. For me, that's the easiest thing. So why not do the easiest thing? Okay, yes, you could right-click, add new item or existing item, and go find it. But here we are, we're all done. All right, so on to step number 5. All right, it says right-click the controls folder and choose add new item. So let's do that. All right, and now they want us to look for a thing here that says web user control, and on my screen it appears down here near the bottom. Make sure, of course, you are using the right language. We are using C#. Make sure that you have a code behind file declared, because we will be writing code for this, and a separate code file is preferred. Notice that there's a change in the file extension down here. So not ASPX, but ASCX. All right. And if all those selections are correct, go ahead and click Add, and then make sure that it appears in there. Make sure you got a code behind file. All right. Now you notice with this that there's a difference, right? When we've been doing pages, you create a new page, whether it's based on the base page or you're creating it from scratch, it puts in those ASP headers at the top, like the one that we see on this page. And then it also puts in the content placeholders if you're building off of a master page, right? So you can drop stuff in, and it does give you all the doc type and stuff. So really, we're just building pieces here. This, however, doesn't make any assumptions about master pages or any of that kind of stuff. That's not how this technology works, because we're not building a whole page. We're building a little component that we're going to put onto pages, right? And it's a reusable component. All right. Step number 6, switch to design view. So let's do that. And it says drag a panel from the toolbox. All right, so, well, I don't have my toolbox, so let's get that up on the screen. And they're telling us it is in the standard area, so let's expand the standard area. And the thing that we want to drag in here, and I'm just kind of reading the instructions in the book. Sometimes I don't think he always writes very clearly. So like, so if it sounds like I'm doing a brain fart here, it really what's happening is like, okay, how did he say that? Okay, oh, all right, that's fine. But here we are. We want the panel control, and of course we do want to drop it into this box. You know, and on the video this is probably impossible to see, but there is a dotted box at the top of the screen, so we do want to drop it in there. Now the next thing that we want to do is with the properties grid, it says here, change the ID of the panel to vertical panel. Now for me, it just happens to be right up at the top. Always remember that you got two different view modes here. Mine is currently an alphabetical view. If you were in this view, then that ID is actually way at the bottom. But I like the alphabetical view for the most part personally, so I'm just going to stick with that. So vertical panel is the title, and press enter to lock that in. Next thing we want to do is we want to grab an image control into the panel. So now right now, if you look at where my I-beam is there, my pointer, you can see that the little designator right at the top here, and I can't really zoom in on that, unfortunately, that does tell me that I'm in the panel. So just make sure that when you're dragging the image control in, that it goes inside that panel and not somewhere else, because there's a reason, a rhyme and a reason to this. And then they also want us to go to the properties grid for that image we just dropped in, and they want us to locate a property named image URL. And you notice how by default, and I can't see like on your screens if you guys can see that clearly, but by default, that's the one that highlighted automatically, because if you're throwing in an image, where's the image? Hello, right? Because we're putting in a control, we're not putting in the image quite yet. All right, so then what we want to do is that with that image property, image URL property, we want to click what they call the ellipsis. That's the 3 dots. If you guys didn't know that, they're called ellipsis. And that's something you probably learned in like 5th grade and forgot, I'm sure. So go ahead and click that, and then what we want to do is we want to navigate and find that image that we just dropped in, and guess what? It's in the images folder, and they want us to choose the one that's 120 by 240. So that's this one. So choose that one, and then go ahead and click OK. Now as soon as you do that and you have it linked up, it knows where to pull the image from, then the image will appear, obviously. Right. The next thing that they want us to do is they want us to use the property area again, and it says locate the alternate text property, and that's going to be up at the top alphabetically, and then just type in, this is a sample banner. Now, this is what we're doing here, folks, of course, is the equivalent of putting in an alt tag on an image in HTML, right? What's the point of putting those in? Accessibility is a big one. Well, the other big one is HTML5 requires it. If you skip an alt tag on an image, you put it in a validator, it'll say, you don't have an alt tag. And of course, a lot of designers will put the alt tag in and then have empty double quotes because it's there. But really what you're doing is you're missing an opportunity if you don't put in some alt text. First of all, Google does look at that when you do searches. So you do a search, and what you put there is important. And what it should do is it should describe what people are looking at. Now, why? And this is one of these HTML fundamentals I want you guys to make sure that you know. Why is it important to have an alt tag?
This image doesn't display the kind of recognize that, or the browser can say, hey, this is supposed to be this.
That's correct. So if the image doesn't load, the text you're putting in the alt tag is what will appear inside where the image would go, so the user knows. But we have this like naive preconception that no matter what browser we're using, we're always going to get the images, that our bandwidth will be good or whatever. But people can turn off images in browsers, and there are browsers that don't show images, like TTY devices, for example. And there's even settings within browsers you can go in and uncheck that. But alt tag is considered a required element, so that make sure that you always throw something in and put in something descriptive that you would want a search engine to find. So if it's a picture of a cheeseburger, you don't want it to say French fries, right? It's not gonna, because Google's not gonna key off of that. So, right, they do want us to switch over to the source code view now and just kind of take a look at what we created. Now, this is fascinating, I think, because we got to remember when we're working with these types of controls, anytime we're dragging and dropping something over, we are working with ASP tools, right? We created the panel, right? That was the first tool we dragged in, and then inside of it, we put in the image, but it's coming in as an ASP image, which of course, when we hit run on the page and it goes to the browser, it just turns it into a regular image tag. So you see how that works. So how much do you really need to memorize this? Frankly, folks, not really. You get used to it over time, you figure it out, it's not really that big of a deal. But notice the image URL and the format of it. Notice how we start with what? A tilde. You guys remember what that meant from last week? Yep. Go to the root of the site and navigate from there. Why is that useful? Well, all right, but think about the portability of a user control. If we're creating something that we could use on many projects, if you're consistent about always having your image folder in the same place, named the same way, and you drop your banner image in there, doesn't matter where you put that control in the project, it will find the file. So it makes it portable. That's the logic. So, yes, Brian?
Does the toolkit only work in ASP.NET, or can that be used in other?
I'm gonna be very cautious about how I answer this one. Yeah, it does depend. I will generally say that you want to use that approach strictly in ASP.NET projects. Okay. The more generic open source way to do it would be to skip the tilde altogether, and you just put in the /. So if I was working in like a static HTML technology, I would probably prefer that approach. With Microsoft tools using ASP.NET, that control converts it to whatever it needs to make it work. But I could hypothetically just strike that and it would probably work the same. Now where it gets a little tricky, and this is so why do they have it, right? And that becomes the question, is we have this naive assumption at this point in your development careers that you make a website and it's just one set of folders. That's not often the case. When you get to really big, large applications, you're going to have really many websites working together, acting as one. And then that's where it gets a little hairy. And then this one will be relative to the root of whatever this website is, which might just be part of a greater whole. Right. That might not really be a great, clear explanation, but it's at least the step kind of down the right path. Good questions, though. All right. Next thing that we want to do is it says wrap the image in anchor tag. Instead, it's href to go to Planet Rocks, of course. All right. So we can do that where? Can I do that right here? Sure, why not? Yeah, so you did it right here, Jason? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, I did it like right before this image URL.
Oh, I see. You try to do it right here.
Yeah.
Right, that's an attribute. That's not going to work. No, what we're going to do is we're just going to take our regular HTML tags and wrap them around that ASP control, and then we're going to put our href right here, and they want us to link to except you got to do this part right, I suppose. Now it does say here, if you want, you can use a code snippet to insert the bare link for you. Now that's up to you. For me, this is just as easy to type it. That's kind of my thinking. Just make sure that your anchor tag is wrapped around the image, and if it helps you to see it better, you might even want to format it like this. You don't waste a little bit of space. At least it's easier to read. Next thing that we want to do is we also want to add a target tag as an attribute. And what we want it to do basically is open up in its own window. So the option for that, of course, is blank. So select that one. They do have an example of what the code should look like in step 11, and I'm happy to say that mine looks just like it. Not like I've done it a few times before, but sometimes I think that's helpful when they show you what it should look like when it's all said and done after they give you the instructions. All right, you say go ahead and save your changes, so hit the little save icon, and then they're suggesting that you close it. If you want to, please go right ahead. Now the next section of the book, and this is on page 290, they're talking about how you take these controls and actually add them either to a regular page or onto a master page. And really functionally it's kind of the same thing. So Where does it make sense to put it? It really depends on your project, right? If you want this banner ad to appear on every page, you put it in the master page. If you want it to appear only on certain pages, then you just put it on those certain pages. So that's kind of up to you. Notice that there is another special directive that happens here called register. And what that does is it actually tells the project that you've built this piece and you want to include it as part of your project. Okay, so it's not really pulling on a master page, it's not pulling on the base page, it's not using a template or anything like that. Remember, it's a thing that you've created that you're moving from project to project. Therefore, you want to register it with the project so that it's recognized. Simple as that. They talk about a couple of different approaches here for doing that. All right, let's move on to the next exercise. So we're on page 291, right up at the top there. And at this point, they would like us to open up the front end master, so let's do that. Go into Design View. All right, and it says locate the drop-down list that enables you to select a theme. So I see that right here. Position your cursor right after the drop-down list. So here, so you see my cursor flashing there, hopefully. It's kind of subtle, but it is there. And then press enter 3 times to create some room. So I'm going to do exactly what they say, 1, 2, 3. So what's that putting in? Probably line breaks or paragraphs, something like that. We'll see. Okay, so from the Solution Explorer, drag the banner ASPX control. Wait, I didn't name mine banner, did I? Yeah. Do I have to do it all again? That's a really good question. Can I just rename it and it'll all be okay? Yeah. That sounds like the voice of experience, folks. Yes, it is. That's one of the reasons we use tools like this, because the truth is, I changed the name of it, it went in and it changed all the other stuff for me. I will tell you something. There were older versions of Visual Studio where that did not happen. So you'd go changing something like this, and really, you're right, you'd be better off just recreating it, because it was probably less work than trying to find all the places where you had to change something. But thank you, Bill Gates, for making our life so easy. Okay, so now I can close this file. But now I have the banner ASCX control, and then I'm going to just drag it right to the empty spot I just created, and I'm assuming it means right where that cursor is flashing, so that's what I'm going to do, drop it right here, and then you can see it drops the control in. So do we kind of look like what's in the book? I think we do. Next thing we're going to do is switch to Markup View. So we're now at the top of page 292. And we do want to kind of take a look here. And the point that they're trying to make is look up near the top of the file here and notice how at the top we do have a directive for the master page, right? Because we're pulling from the master. Or excuse me, this is the master. But then we're also registering that control. Now, since we're putting it on the master page, please keep in mind that banner ad is going to pop up on all the pages now. All pages will have this tool, or this, excuse me, this control available. Notice how it is formatted. Shows us where it is. It's got a tag name. Interesting. It's got a tag prefix. Now I say on purpose, right? Because like, what is that for? Right? So when do you think we're going to figure that out? How about when we run the page and we look at the view that's created? Because it does do something for us. All right, it says save the changes to the master page and close it. Let's do exactly what they say. Now we're going to go up to the monochrome CSS file, and you guys at this point should know where to find that, I'm hoping. And we're going to add one little snippet of CSS. And you can place this anywhere on the CSS file, doesn't matter. For me, I'm actually going to place it up near the top. And I want to talk about this one because this one really kind of has gone by the wayside as of late. But in the old days, this was a very necessary little CSS edition. In essence, what this does is it tells the browser not to put a blue line around images that are clickable. Now, you guys may have never have encountered this before because you've learned HTML so late, and you learned HTML5. But in the old days, some browsers, you would make an image linkable. So you put the anchor tags around it, make it linkable, and like Internet Explorer, most notably, some versions of Internet Explorer would put a blue box around it. So how am I supposed to know if an image is clickable? You put a blue box around it, right? The way that we know how an image is clickable now is like we hover our mouse over it and see it changes into like a different kind of pointer, right? So, and for most modern browsers, we don't need to put this in. However, if you know you're dealing with anything legacy, you want to do this. Now, the reason why, more so than anything, is if you are controlling a layout that's pixel perfect, and one pixel is enough to break your layout, that's often the case, it can be disastrous. So this is actually a good fail-safe piece of CSS to put in, unless, of course, for some odd reason you do want a blue line around your images that are clickable. God, I hope not, right? I think this is aesthetically hideous, right? But, you know, I'm sure you could make it work. All right, go ahead and save that. Also, drop this same snippet of code into the other CSS file as you would probably anticipate. I'm putting it in the same spot on both files and saving both, and then I'm going to go ahead and close both. All right, so at this point what they want us to do is come over to the Solution Explorer and right-click the default page and go ahead and view in browser and see what we got. And if we did everything correctly, which of course we did, right? You should have something that looks like this. Not too bad. Now, in this view, it's not too bad. Let's try switching themes. It's not too bad there either. If you want, click on it. You know, if you have the time, you could also experiment with that image border 0 style there or not, and then try different browsers and see what happens. I'm currently using the new Firefox Developer Edition. I've been playing with that per all the raves of many of my students. So why not check it out? But this seems to handle it pretty well. All right. If for some reason you guys don't see the banner at all, is there anybody in that situation here? Everybody's okay? Okay, good. Usually we have at least one, right? Because you miss a step somewhere and it doesn't work. Then you want to really go back real carefully and take a look at a couple of things. Well, the book makes one little thing that's kind of interesting here. It says, if you don't see the banner appear at all, check to see if you're running ad blocking software, because guess what you guys are creating? Annoying banner ads that some browsers, including Google Chrome now, that they're like starting to build in the ad blockers and stuff. And boy, I get into these discussions with students all the time. You know, some people, why aren't you running an ad blocker? Well, maybe I want to see the ads. Sometimes I do, because I'm always curious about like the kind of stuff that I do online, and then what kind of ads they're putting out there. So like if we're exploring like online high school for my son, for example, and all of a sudden all my banner ads are like, hey, Wisconsin high schools, or whatever. You know, yeah. And did you know that if you ever go onto a webpage, I don't want to do it right now, but if you see any of the ads and they got that little ad choices link in the corner, have you guys ever clicked on that? You should. You should click on it. You can actually opt in and opt out and make settings and tell them what you prefer. You know, so if you want nothing but pornography, you can get that. No, you don't want that. There's always one. You are married, aren't you?
Yeah.
All right, folks, I think this is a great time to take a break. So let's pause for a bit and come back and continue our work. Here we go. All right, we're back from break, and we are now at the bottom of page 293, and we're moving on to the next topic, which is the site-wide registration of user controls. All right, so to do this, we are going to need to get into our web config file. So go ahead and give that a click to open it up. Now, it depending on the version you're working with, and the author is making a point of talking about what version of ASP.NET is happening here, because you notice that the compile engine here says target framework is version 4.5, and we are at the point in time where the .NET framework has progressed on from 4.5, but 4.5 is still the most common version that people are coding to, partially because it's well supported across operating systems. But there are versions 4.6 and higher with little subversions, and you can choose to author to those. But the point that he's making in step one, if you were working in straight .NET 4, you often don't see as much in these files because it was handled more automatically. All right, so just be aware of that. If you ever end up dealing with legacy applications, that sometimes this type of information might be in different places. And the one notable file that he's pointing out is that there's, aside from web config, there's also a file in older versions that was machine.config. So that's kind of an interesting note. All right, so they do want us to locate the pages element, and that's the one where we put the theme on it. And then inside this tag, now you notice that this is actually a self-closing tag. So really what he's asking us to do is to take that self-closing tag out and then put in the closing tag, and then add an additional tag inside. And the tag he wants us to add is controls. Now you could paste this in from the book, and I probably should be doing that, but how about I just add the line that goes in between that? All right, so basically what we're doing here is we're throwing in a little thing here that tells it that our pages will have a control. This is the control. This is what it's called. This is where it's located. And basically, by putting it in the web config file, it is now registered site-wide. So all the pages have basically an attachment to it. Go ahead and do a Control S to save. The author recommends closing it, so I guess if you want to do that, do that. All right, go back to your front-end master at this point, and then it says locate the banner control in the sidebar area. Now that should be towards the bottom, so that's right down here. And are you guys noticing anything that's different here? Yeah, so what the heck? The book says something different. What's going on here? Well, here's what's going on here. The UC1 stands for, of course, User Control 1, that was auto-created, and what we just did in the web config file was tell it that we had a tag prefix of rocks. So what we're going to do here is we're actually going to change this to match that so it knows which one it's talking about. Okay. Now the one that they're indicating here is a self-closing tag, but the book is making a point that if for some reason yours has its own closing tag, and I'll just pull this over so you can see it like this. So basically you want to end up with one version or the other, but when you use the closing tag here, notice that it also has the rocks in it, so don't overlook it if yours is in that format. It shouldn't be with the tools that we're using. Maybe older versions that would have been the case. All right. Now, because we registered the control site-wide in the web config file, guess what we get to do? We get to remove the register thing here. So we can get rid of that. Just remove the whole line. Right, go ahead and save the page and close it. And then what they want us to do is, of course, open it up in the browser. Let's just make sure it's still working, right? We want to break things. And if it did work, you'll see that the banner is showing up just fine. Not a bad idea to check the other theme as well. It should work if it worked before. All right, so everything seemed to be working okay, folks. So we're going to move on to our next exercise. All right, now one of the things that they bring up in the book here is this concept of client IDs. And they're talking about this for a couple reasons. One is, all right, and maybe like the best way to explain this is to actually run the page. But if you guys notice that when we generate a page in a browser, you do that right click and it generates all this weird code, you know, why does it do that? Well, to make it, basically give it a unique identifier that kind of connects it from the server to the client, so the server is aware of what client is pulling in the page. It actually creates a unique identifier. Now, when we're just like dishing out one page to one client, it's not a big deal, but when you're doing that to lots of them, that actually becomes a thing that you got to manage. So that's the point of this. If you want to go ahead and read that, I think that'll help you understand it a little better. But there are some things that we do that are going to make it necessary for us to kind of take this to the next step. So what we've done right now is we've created a banner ad that sits horizontally for both projects, right? Excuse me, vertically for both projects. What we're hoping to do is to change this so that it dynamically adjusts depending on where we place it. So for example, right now, we're putting this in a sidebar, and the sidebar is of a certain width, and the image is of a certain width, and it fits. And it's not crowded, it's got a little space around it, and it looks okay, right? But what if I have like a big open space like what I see here? That would look a little more awkward here. It would be better to have a horizontal banner in this space. But I don't want to be creating a separate control, because I just went ahead and I registered this thing site-wide, and it's on the master page, so it's going to come up automatically. But what I really want to do is I want to write a little bit of code that's going to allow it to dynamically switch from horizontal to vertical without me doing a thing, but still use the same user control. So this is kind of fun stuff, I think. So now, in order for us to be able to do this, we need to do a little bit of something, and we're going to learn, and maybe you guys have not heard of this type of a data structure before in a programming language, so I'm going to hopefully make it a little bit clearer for you. But what we're going to do in essence is we're going to take the two images and we're going to put them into a data structure so that we can just refer to either one image or the other as we need and call it up dynamically. Now, usually you would use like an array structure or a collection, something like that. Now, that's great if you want to use index values. So like, let's say position 0 is vertical, position 1 is horizontal, right? But what about if we could, instead of using index numbers, use names? So why don't we just name that one position horizontal and the other one vertical? And that's called an enumeration. And really what that is, in its essence, is the fact that you are foregoing the index value and you're using a plain English name for it. So really what we're doing is key value pairs. So if you ever hear me saying that, like you guys are learning JSON in the other class, we'll probably touch on it here a little bit. But that's just Visual Studio's way of creating a named structure. And you're going to see, if you look at the C# code, the very simple values for it. So you see that we just use this thing called enum, and that stands for enumeration. And then that enumeration will have a name of direction. So we can say direction, horizontal, and it will do it. Right? And the whole point of it is so that we're creating syntax that's easy for us to understand, rather than direction 0. What is that? Is the 0 horizontal or is it vertical? You know, that's the Y. So that in the future you don't have to struggle with it. All right. So we're moving on now, very bottom of page 298. And I'm going to close my browser here. All right. So we are going to go up to our app code folder at this point, because that's where our code's going to go. And we need to basically create a class file in here that's going to allow us to declare the enumeration. So the enumerations are going to become a data structure that's going to sit separate from the control, and then we just refer to it. All right. So we're going to right-click that folder. We're going to add a new item, and then we are going to choose a class file. So you can probably just choose class from right down here at the bottom and go ahead and just call it direction, capital D. All right. Okay, inside the constructor function, now actually I'm reading this here, and really the directive says once the file opens, clear its contents, so get rid of everything, and add the following code to it. Now the reason for that is we aren't going to be needing any of the libraries that it imports by default. We're not necessarily instantiating anything, so we really don't need a constructor function. And we aren't really actually creating a class either. We're creating an enumeration. So we're just going to take the code that's in the book in step number 2, top of page 299, and just paste that in. And so we're declaring an enumeration called direction with 2 values, horizontal and vertical. And that's it. That's it. Simple as that. So go ahead and save that. Go ahead and close it. Now we're going to go to the banner control code behind file, which is this one here. And we're going to add some stuff here. So now, you guys have worked with other languages, right? Where you've learned about instantiating things, right? Building things, building objects off of classes, so making them a thing. And then what's pretty standard is you do a get and a set, those steps. And what's really kind of cool about C# is how simple it is to do in this language. Without having to actually spell out separate methods, we can do it with one really clean little piece of code. All right, so I'm reading the instructions here, and if I sound like I'm hesitating a little bit, and it says open the code behind file, yada, yada, yada. To help you create properties, Visual Studio comes with a handy code snippet. To activate the snippet in C#, type prop and then press tab twice. Now, the question is, where are you adding that? Does it really even tell you? Can I guess it should go on the page load? I think that's pretty safe, right? So let's say prop, and then it said press tab once, twice. Catch that? That's a pretty slick trick. It really is, isn't it? All right. But it says here, however, this creates a full property rather than an automatic property, which is what's used in this exercise. So you're better off typing the code manually in this case. Okay, well, thanks. But what it's showing you is the cool tool that exists. So it automatically just creates this thing. And the truth is, I put it at totally the wrong spot. You guys catching that too? All right. Okay, once the code is inserted, you can press tab again to move from field to field, blah, blah, blah. That's not what I should put in the video, I suppose. So I'm going to Control Z this, folks. And really, not my, very, very sincerely, where should this go? Here, maybe? All right, I got one that probably doesn't matter. You know what? You're probably right. But this one's going to be called display direction, and then we're going to do our get and our set. What do you think? Is this okay? Now, right after they give you this directive on the page, it says common mistakes. Make sure you add the property outside the page load method. All right, so the book does actually tell you. What I don't like is the fact that they tell you after. Why don't you just take that and you put it in the instructions itself? You know? All right. Do you guys think am I outside the page load method? Yes, but I'm still inside the class, so I should be fine. John?
I put mine on top of the page load.
On top of the page load.
So that's just,
Okay. Folks, these are methods, doesn't matter. The answer is no, right? They execute when they're called upon. All right, so now we're going to go, you should probably save this, I assume. Not a bad idea. Open the markup view of the control itself. So you need to switch over to the control and then be in the code view. And then copy the entire ASP panel and paste it right below the existing panel. You guys catching this? The entire panel and paste it right below. And yes, it will underline because now you have two that are the same. Did you guys catch that as the video was happening? It was the same. It was underlined green, and then it did what? Changed it. Pretty slick. Older versions of Visual Studio did not do that. It kind of threw me for a loop when I saw that the first time. All right. Name the control horizontal panel. And set the image URL to the other image. So probably the best way to do that, well, I probably didn't need to undo all that, right? Could I just like type it in? I could look at the images folder, and this one's just 486 by 60. Sure. All right. Or you can get rid of what's in there and see what I did is, and they give you the hotkey for it, is control space, and then it triggers this interface where I can pick the URL, find the image, and choose the right one. Like that. Either way, as long as you get it in there, that's really kind of what it comes down to. None of the other stuff needs to change, at least for this step. Good idea to do a Control S to save that right now. All right, now we're going to go back to the code behind the control, which I still have open here. And now we got a bunch of different stuff to dump into the page load method. And basically what it is, it's a switch statement. You could just as easily do this with an if statement, honestly. And I'll tell you what, if I was coding this from scratch, I'd probably choose if, because there's only two states, right? It's one or the other. So that's what I would do. But there's a reason for this. So notice that the switch statement is basically going to grab as an input the display direction, and then look at whether or not we're horizontal or vertical, and then change the visibility of the horizontal or the vertical panel visibility to true or false, as would dictate. So if you have case direction horizontal, well, then you want the horizontal visible to be true, right? Because that's what you're choosing. It's pretty simple logic. Not very complicated code at all, but interesting. All right, so save and close both files for now, which I'm doing and have done. Back to the master page. All right, stay in Markup View. And then locate the user control. We know where that is. It's towards the bottom. And then they want us to add here right after the run at server directive, basically what will become a default, and I'm actually going to caution myself and not say default, but enter a predetermined direction for this, which in this case is horizontal. Now, isn't it fascinating that Visual Studio's IntelliSense automatically found display direction? Where's display direction again? It's in the app code folder, right? And it's reading that, and as I'm looking for an attribute value, it goes to the file and it pulls it in. Where is it pulling it in from? The enumeration that we created. Pretty slick, right? A lot more meaningful than 0 and 1. So you see like the why you put a name on it and why that construct was invented. All right, so we choose horizontal here. Now, my display direction is not registering quite right, is it? Or it was. Had a little, okay, it went away. Yeah, so don't panic. Oh my God, run. All right, save all your changes, folks. Let's do that. And go ahead and pull up the default page again in the browser. Now, if I remember right, I think he's intending to make a break here. I'm going to scroll down in the book. And, well, yeah, it's horizontal because we told it to be. But is this what we want? Not on this page, right? Switch to the other page. It doesn't really work there either, does it? Okay. Can you guys guess that we have some more work to do? Yes, we do. So let's see if we can get that done. Right. So back over to the master page and change it from horizontal to vertical. Give it a second to recognize the code. Now, I closed my browser, but he's saying that you could have just refreshed it at this point and it would have worked. So let's just get that browser up and running. All right, so you guys got it back to where it should be. But you notice now how you can control it by just putting in that display direction and a word that makes sense to you, all with named constructs that you created. Good programmers do this type of thing all the time. They name things in ways that make sense. They create structures that make their life easier so that the IntelliSense picks up on it and you know exactly what they're doing. Programmers that either don't want other people to copy their code or don't know what the heck they're doing will go with all the default names, and they would have left UC1 in there, and they would have just called it whatever, and 0 and 1, and then good luck figuring it out. So the reason you do this stuff up front is to make your life easier as you're going down the road. So, all right. Step number 11, folks. Open up the About Us page. Right, and this is inside of Visual Studio, mind you. So let's find that. And where the heck did we put that? Oh, in the About folder, that's right. And they do want us to be in Markup View. All right, it says if you don't have that file created first, well, yeah, hopefully you didn't just come right to this chapter. All right, so what they do want us to put in here, it says add some text describing you or your organization and the reason you created the site. And that should be in the CP main content area, which is this lower one. What's our organization? I don't know what to type here. I'm going to be silly. I don't know what to type here, but here it is. Anyhow. All right. Then what they want us to do, and there's a reason why they did it like this, just so you know. They want us to go to Design View now, and you can see where that text is, right? And they want you right below the text you just added, because you know what would happen is if you didn't add the text, you wouldn't have enough space in here to add anything. That's the why. And what we're going to do is, you know, what I would suggest is that you put in a carriage return and then take the banner control and drop it into that spot. So let's find the banner control and just drop it right in there. Now, isn't this interesting? Last time we dragged and dropped it in, it just gave us the vertical. Now it's giving us both, right? Because if you remember, if you look at the control, it has two panels in it. And we're not triggering any code right now that says visible true or false. So yeah, that causes a little bit of a change here. Yep. Yes, I did hit enter and dropped it into that spot. All right. It says select the user control you just added in design view, which it already is. Open the property grid and set display direction to horizontal. So now this is even more interesting because you created that enumeration. Guess what? It pops up in your properties grid now too. So you're creating a custom property, really a custom attribute, and you're controlling it. It's really kind of, now as simplistic as what we're doing is, the capability of what we're doing is intense. I mean, this is total tip of the iceberg, folks, because if you can do this, think of all the other possible things you might be able to do. And there's lots of things. It's really kind of an imagination limited kind of thing. And then what we want to do here is, you know, because we created an enumeration, it just pops up in a list. That's awesome. So we set it to horizontal. Okay, so save all your changes. And then do what? Control F5 to open it. So let's just hit the play button. It should bring up the About Us page. And voila, we have a horizontal banner. Now really I should have probably put more carriage returns in there, but whatever, it's there. Right? Pretty darn cool. It's always fun to kind of take a look at the source code too. They're not really telling us to do it in the book, but you know, this is something you guys should be in the habit of doing. And what am I looking at? I'm trying to look at what the output of my code is. So you see all these different things that are placed in here, the divs that are automatically created, how everything's switched over to standard HTML5 tags, you know, the paths. I also want you to kind of start paying attention to some of the things that are happening up at the top here, like this weird stuff. Oh, where's that coming from? Well, that's coming from the CSS file that's dynamically switching themes, right? It's always interesting to see the results of your work. These are all handled automatically. You had nothing to do with coding it. So when you go out to websites now and you start doing that right-click view source to try to figure out what they're doing, you saw all this weird gobbledygook. Now you can start to understand that they didn't even write that. The tool wrote it for them, right? So nobody's sitting there writing that code by hand. All right, we're going to go on to bottom of page 302, top of 303, and we're going to do add another little thing here. And what they're calling this is what it fits into the category of a view state property. Now, you should be learning. And I know people in my Web 2 class right now, because we were talking about this the other night a little bit, how HTTP is a stateless protocol. So its only job is to move data back and forth, right? It does not maintain the state of the application, so you have to code that in. So this is actually adding a little snippet here that's kind of tracking the view state is really what's going. So they want us at this point to go to the code behind close the web server there, of the about us. So I don't have that open. I need to open that here. And then in the page load method, we're just going to add a simple little if statement. All right. I am getting a red underline here, which of course does concern me. Right? Is everybody getting it?
Yeah.
You should. And I see a couple of you are hovering over it. And it says, direction, type direction is defined in an assembly that is not referenced. You must reference the assembly, yada, 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 yada. Okay. We're not going to, basically we're not worrying about it right now, is the point. That's why I said yada, yada, yada. All right. But what we're doing here is, let's take a look at the if statement first. Let's try to wrap our heads around this. The way that code reads, it says if, what's the exclamation for? Not. If not, page is postback. So if the page is postback, what was the postback? Yeah, we're sending stuff back to the server. Okay, so if the page is not being posted back, then the display direction should be vertical. That's how it reads. All right. All right, they do want you to make sure, though, that banner 2 matches what's on the actual page. So you need to go here, you need to take a look. You can look right here in the design view. It does say rocks banner ID banner 2, but you can also do it in the source code. And indeed, it does say banner 2. All right. So in this point, and I'm reading the guy's instructions because I always, kind of question. You guys should kind of do the same thing. It says switch to design view and add a button control by dragging it from the standard category on top of the banner ASCX control. So think about that really carefully. On top, so we're going to drag the button, so we want to be here. Here's the banner control. We're going to grab a button and we're going to drop it right onto the control. Weird, right? So it says that it's placed inside the page, not defined in the master page. So this is inside the page, right? Okay, so we're going to take the button control, we're going to drag it, and you notice, it is allowing us to do it, right? So really what's happening here is we're making this clickable. All right. Now I'm reading step number 3. So save the page, open it in your browser. Let's do that. So let's save both of the open pages. Yes, I'm not ignoring the red underline. There's method to madness, so just follow along. All right, open it in your browser. So let's do that. Hit play. Now it says, because of the code in page load, the first time the page loads, the banner at the bottom of the screen displays the vertical banner. Now click the button. We didn't write any code. So why does it work? Match. All right, so now the reason here's the very simple reason why it works. Now if you remember the if statement that we wrote, by virtue of clicking the button, we are creating a post back, right? So it triggers a couple of times. Isn't that weird? All right. Now, I don't know how really useful that is, but it's kind of interesting to know that you can write code to react to that. I don't know. You can judge for yourself. All right. All right, we're going to do a little bit of tweaking here. It says to avoid this problem, you need to implement this as a view state property. So this is what they're trying to do, is they're trying to show you what the view state is by kind of showing you how it fails and then how it's going to work. All right, so it says to implement the property, add the following code to the code behind of the banner ASCX control. So I'm closing my browser again, stopping the web server, going to the code behind, and then they have a bunch of code here that you need to add. So what they're adding is a complete new method called navigate URL. So what I'm going to do is create a little space here and paste in the code. And I'll close my output box here and then zoom out just a little bit so you can kind of get the whole view of it. So it should look like this when you're done. And then are you guys noticing the get and the set inside of here? Now, without getting into a real lengthy discussion about what all this code means, basically what it's doing is it is taking into consideration what the state of the browser is. Remember, HTTP can't do it on its own. That's why we need a server-side language to check it for us. All right. All right, now they want us to switch to the markup view of the user control. So save your code behind file. But we want to go to the banner, right? That's our user control. And we want to be in markup view. So we want to be looking at the code. And then give the link in the vertical panel an ID. So the link, where's the link? Ah, here, right? The link is the anchor tag. Here we want to add a run at directive. Where do we want to run it? Well, there's only one place we can, at the server. And add an ID. And this is something you will hand code, which is vertical link. Now we're going to do the same thing below for the horizontal, except of course we are going to change vertical to horizontal. Right, then they want us to switch to the code behind. And now we are going to add a couple of things here to our case statements. We're basically going to add one additional line to each. Yes, you can copy paste if you got the e-version of the book available. You guys are probably getting red underlines too, right? One thing you might want to consider doing is maybe saving the control and saving the code file. Is that fixing it? Well, what does the little light bulb say? It's telling us that we're missing something, is what it's telling you. What's kind of interesting here is that the tool automatically suggests a way to fix it, but really what's going on is it's telling you, display direction we already set up preemptively. This we have not. So it's indicating to you that you might want to add something like that. All right. Are we going to? Well, it's not telling us to, so let's not. How about that? But they do want us to go back to the code behind of About Us, and we are going to add in this very first directive here. Oops, errantly typed a character. So if in the page is postback, they want us to change this. They want us to change it so it looks like this. did. Thank you. Good catch. That's why it's good to have a second set of eyes. I deleted get by mistake. Not good. All right. Save all your changes. And then bring up the About Us page. Oh, I got build errors. You guys there with me? Doesn't like it. It does want that piece in there, so how are we going to fix that? Yeah, all right, let me close the browser at this point and just backtrack one little bit. Make sure all my stuff is saved. It should all be saved, right? Because anytime you hit that play button, it saves everything in your project. You guys know that by now, I hope. But now I'm just retracing my steps to make sure that everything is okay. So we did make some changes here. Navigate URL, but it's not finding it. We did make some changes here. And I just love these tools. Show potential fixes. Generate. But here's the thing, it doesn't tell us to do any of that. So what's my fix? 12-pack of beer? Yes. You know, sometimes it makes your brain feel like that, right? And that's actually okay on a Friday, but which today is. So I am kind of scrolling through here and trying to figure out where I missed a step. Did I miss a step? Let's backtrack all the way to the beginning of this exercise and see if there's anything that I missed. I don't think so. Well, that's the question, right? It's not finding it. Well, it has to have some sort of a connection, right? And that's what the automatic tools are trying to point out. But what I want to do here is I want to make sure that we didn't skip a step. So I'm pausing for just a moment. Okay, so we were doing a little investigation here in class, and I and some of the other people here in class came up with the same answer at the same time. And I looked at my previous work and discovered that this navigate URL should not be in the code behind for About Us. It should be in the code behind here. And that is on the banner page. So both of those will need to be saved. All right, and they do want us, once we've done that, to run the About Us page. So that's what I'm about to do. And we'll see if we get any build errors. No build errors this time. All right. It says click the horizontal banner on the left side of the page, right? And it should take us to the URL that we specify, which of course takes us to the author's site, so you can get as many hits as possible, right? So you can get a lot of advertising revenue, or whatever his deal is. All right. Now, step number 9 is kind of interesting here, and read this. It says close this new window and click the button you added to the About Us earlier to cause a post back. Once it's clicked, you guys are noticing that the page is reloading, right? But notice that you're not like going anywhere different. It says you are taken, once the page is loaded, click the banner image again, and notice that you are going back to the same site. Well, I guess that's what I was expecting. But is that what we originally set up? I want you to think about that. No, we originally set it to go to the Planet Rocks site. Right, so what's happening is, by virtue of this post back, that explains the code that we're working on here, not here, but here, where I put it in the right spot, right? And keep in mind that we had like that other site, right? Here's the Planet Rocks. And where did we specify that other one? Do you guys remember? I mean, these are both Planet Rocks. Here's where we did it. So on the page itself, where we have the control, as soon as you hit that button, it does a post back to the server, right? So once that happens, then it loads this other URL, and we've changed the URL of the control to take us somewhere else. Right? Really what they're teaching us in this chapter is how to create annoying banner ads that when you click on them take you somewhere other than where they think they're going. All right. I'm not really sure why this is a useful skill, but they're just assuming that you guys are going to go out and get jobs being people that generate ads that eventually get blocked by ad blockers or something. But no, really what they're teaching is some pretty sophisticated techniques. And I know some of this is maybe a little fuzzy for you guys at this time, and it's really kind of an introduction. So just take it for what it is. But we really are exploring the tip of the iceberg of some pretty sophisticated little tools that are available in this environment. All right, folks, that actually wraps the chapter. We finished all the exercises, which is a wonderful thing. And I would encourage you now to move on to Chapter 9. And I don't know if you guys have noticed in our current unit that we are covering 2 chapters in the same unit, and the due dates are staggered accordingly. And right now the due dates are pretty comfortable, meaning that we still have time to work on things. So my plan next time we get together is I do want to go through Chapter 9, but in class here, for those that are starting to work on their personal projects, we might also take a little bit of time as a diversion to kind of look at the project and some of the issues that you guys might be having, especially with layouts and working with the tools. So depending on what type of thing is presented, we may end up recording it as an example. So if you guys are working on your stuff and you're stuck on something or whatever, next week's going to be a great time to talk about it. We're doing great on time this semester. We're actually proceeding at a rate, believe it or not, that's a little bit faster than I sometimes manage in this class, which is good because we'll either squeeze in more time for more advanced concepts and or more time working on these personal projects as we get towards the end. So the intent really is that we get the personal projects basically demonstrated on the last night of class. And I think for this it's April, I don't know, don't quote me. It's in April sometime. All right, folks, that's it for tonight. Have a good night. We'll see you next week.